everyone. Hopefully the technical difficulty has been solved for now. Thanks for being patient with us. Cool. So we're going to continue the introductions. Harshada, I didn't know if did you want to do your intro again? I know you got echoed out.
So again, my name is Harshada. I'm a product manager at Visual Studio's debugging and profiling team. And I've been in the team for 3 years. And I love making the debugging flow better for the users and developers. My favorite feature in Visual Studio, specifically in debugging, is force run to cursor. So you can skip over the breakpoints. You can still keep the breakpoints, but you can execute a particular line of code. So you don't have to wait on every breakpoint if you don't want to. And I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Harshada. So going down the line, Dante, you're up.
Sure. My name is Dante Gagne. I'm a senior product manager on Visual Studio. Currently, I work on the editor. I've been with Microsoft almost 22 years now. I was originally one of the testers on the Expression Blend product, so I've been primarily in application development, WPF, and spaces like that. I'm also, I've worked quite a bit in accessibility. So one of the areas I'm passionate about is making sure that everybody can use Visual Studio. And if you're going to pick on one of my favorite features for Visual Studio, it'd probably be the audio cues in VS. You can turn that on, and as you move around with the cursor, you'll get different sounds if you arrive on a line that's got an error or a breakpoint or things like that. And it was originally designed for folks with a visual disability, but I have ADHD, and it actually helps me kind of anchor myself to the code. So as I'm moving around, those little sounds help keep me focused on what I'm working with. So that's one of the areas I've really found it's got a lot of value for me.
Cool. Great. I love audio keys too, especially because you can change the sound effects. I've been using Mario noises for mine.
Whatever works. It's great.
It's cool. All right, Wendy, you're up.
Hi, I'm Wendy Briding. I'm a product manager on the .NET team. I work on C# Dev Kit and testing features and the language and productivity tooling for C# and F# and all that fun stuff. I don't spend a whole lot of time in Visual Studio since I'm a Visual Studio Code person and I love C# Dev Kit. But if I had to pick a favorite Visual Studio feature, I would have to say live unit testing.
Sweet. Live unit testing needs more love.
It does.
I think it does. Great. And then Sebastian?
Yeah, I'm Sebastian, a software engineer in the Visual Studio version control team. I'm biased regarding the favorite features because I work in Git, so a lot of the Git integration, I would say, kind of falls in that bucket. Specifically, anything from cherry picking to merge conflicts, dealing with that in the IDE is a lot simpler, in my opinion. Regarding things outside of Git, I really like the watch debugging tool. I think it's a debugging tool where you kind of write variables and methods ahead of time when you're debugging, and you can see the output. So that watch and locals in the debugger are great as well.
Great. And now last but certainly not least, we have our two remote folks. So Jordan, let's start with you.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. So I'm Jordan. I'm a member of the .NET team focused on experiences building .NET applications that use AI in them. So you're building an app that uses AI functionality in your app. Been at Microsoft 12 years, and I've been in the industry way too long working with
But
.NET.
we can't hear you, unfortunately, right now.
Hear me? Oh, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, this is live because it's not a super smooth technical experience, but that's okay. We're going to figure it out. All right. Cool. So unfortunately, yeah, okay. We're going to continue to try to fix the audio issue that's happening on StreamYard. I apologize. So in the meantime, we'll start with demos and then keep checking back to see if StreamYard is being nice, just so we can start talking about some cool stuff instead of watching us fix some technical difficulties. So Dante, if you don't mind going first,
Sure.
we'll talk about some editor stuff.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So once again, my name is Dante. I'm one of the PMs on the editor team. And basically my team's charter is, as editor and productivity, our goal is to help you as developers get whatever's in your head into the code as easily and as, stress-free as possible. And whether that's productivity, whether that's making use of AI or anything like that, that's what our main charter is. So I want to show you some of the things that are in Visual Studio. Some of these you probably already know. Some of them should be new to you. Some of these are already available. Some of these are coming out in the next preview that we're going to be releasing. Some of these are a little bit further forward, and I just want to show you a range of some things that I'd love to show off. Now, I've got Visual Studio up, which, you'll be able to see up on the screen there. Yeah, my Visual Studio might look a little different from yours. One of the things that I've got up here is the new UI refresh. If you watch the Visual Studio blogs, you probably have already seen this, and I'll show you how to get to this a little bit later on. But we'll get into that in a little bit later. But one of the things I do want to start with is some of the improvements we've made to all-in-one search. Now, all-in-one search we've had for a little while, but we've been making improvements on it. And a lot of the improvements we've been doing have definitely been coming from developer community. Now, I'm assuming most folks are familiar with developer community, but if you're not, under the help menu, under send feedback, we've got report a problem and suggest a feature. Most of what I'm going to be showing you today have come from these two places. So if you've got some area where you think you've got an idea that you'd love to see Visual Studio improve, we encourage you to go to these areas, look at what's up there, vote for what's there. This is where most of the things that you're going to see today have come from. So all-in-one search, I just said I've been with Microsoft almost 22 years. I am terrible at keyboard shortcuts. I always forget my keyboard shortcuts. Control Q is the all-in-one search. If you're not already using this, I recommend it. I forget the keyboard shortcut for error list all the time. With all-in-one search, I hit Control Q and just type error list. Now, I had error list open, but if I didn't have it open, because I had been practicing my demo and it's supposed to be closed, I type error list, press enter, and it just opens it for me. Whatever I'm looking for, I can just type that feature. That works for any menu command. It works for any panel, anything like that. I can just type it. Now, one of the improvements that we made is, I've got an error here in my error list. I'm just going to hit Control C, which is one of the keyboard shortcuts most people know. I'm going to go to Notepad, and when I paste, it only pastes the error message. Folks who've been using Visual Studio for a long time know that when you used to copy a row, it used to copy the error code, the message, the file name. It used to put it all as a long string. Now it just copies the error message. So if you want to go to your favorite browser and paste that in to get information about that error message, it's a lot easier to do that now. Small thing, but like I mentioned, our mission is to make it easier for you to make your progress. This is one of those little things. And in fact, if your idea is, I want to go search the web for a particular error code, now we've even added here in the context menu, search the web for help. So I can just right click it and select, and it will go ahead and open to whatever your default browser is, throw the message in there, and it'll immediately search for you. So just a couple steps to try to streamline your process to make things a little bit easier for you. Now, that's one of the improvements we've made. A couple other things. I'm going to hit Control T, which is code search. We've always gotten feedback from folks that there still are quite a few different ways to search for code. Code search is trying to be the single way to search for code. So if you want to search for code, I can just type here, and this will do all my different kinds of searches for me. One of the improvements we are putting in right now, and this should be coming in the next preview, is I can just type :6, and that will jump to line 6 in my code. So we've moved go to line here into the all-in-one search, trying to make it the one thing. I can also :T and type, randomizer class, randomizer core.cs, randomizer core.cs, :9, and it will go to that file and jump to that line. So just another small thing that we've added to make it a little bit easier. Also in the code search over here on the right, we have scoping. So if you want to scope your search down, if you're already using all-in-one search, now you've got a little bit more control over how it does. These are all pieces of feedback that people who are using all-in-one search have given us, and we're just trying to iterate on that one, hearing from folks what you want it to do, just try to make it a little bit more useful for you. Lastly, we have gotten folks who have said they want the search window. Right now, it's a gentle dismiss, so it's easy to just get rid of it after you're using it. If you want a dockable search, we now have a button that will turn it into a standard dockable window. So I can now dock it over to the side. It's a little small here, but I've got a smaller resolution for streaming purposes. But now I can go ahead and I can tear this out and dock it wherever I want it to be. If you change your mind and you don't want it dockable, just close it, and then the next time you use it, it will be a standard dockable window. So Okay, well. So these are a couple of the changes that are coming out in the next preview of Visual Studio. So all-in-one search is one of those things that we're really making some improvements on, and we're really trying to make it the next method for using. Find your methods, find your commands, find your code. We're trying to make it all in one site to just make it easier to find what you're working with. Now, that's all-in-one search. I want to flip over now and show some of the features that we've been doing more in the editor. I've got another document that I'm working with here. Hover preview. This was a sample project I was working with for this particular project. And, I've got some PNGs in here. If I hover over it, Visual Studio sees these assets in the same folder. It just gives me a preview of what that file is. This was just a sample project I was using for some testing purposes. As long as they're in the same file or same folder as the file I'm working with, it just gives me a preview right here in the editor. It just makes it a little bit easier to work with it. It supports PNG, JPEG, GIF, a lot of the formats that C# does. SVG is the only one it doesn't support, but that's because C# doesn't natively support SVG. But we're even looking at implementing that one later. Again, these are just small things to try to make your existence a little bit more streamlined. Another one, I mentioned before that there are some keyboard shortcuts. I'm terrible with keyboard shortcuts. One keyboard shortcut we did improve: comment lines. It used to be Control-K, Control/. Now it's just Control/. We're the only editor that didn't use Control/. Now we went ahead and updated that. So now in Visual Studio, Control/ is comment line. It's just one of those things. We just wanted to be consistent with the other editors. And this was a big feedback ticket. We went ahead and made that edit in Visual Studio. Another thing that we improved, particularly for comments, and this was one that we were really excited to finally get in. Let me go into Tools Options real quick. Oh, I actually have the tab open. Yes, my Tools Options looks very different, and I'll come back to this one in a moment as well. I'm going to go to my fonts and colors. And no, fonts and colors isn't newer. I really want to fix that one. I'm going to go to comments, and you'll notice over here I've got bold, italic, strike through. We can now apply font decorator, not bold, I want italics. We can now apply font decorators to individual attributes. So now my comments are in italics. So an italic comment falls a little bit more to the background visually. You can apply those to individual attributes in your code. Maybe you want your overrides to be bold to make them jump out a little bit better. You've got a little bit more control over how you want your attributes to look in your code, just to give it a little bit more visual pop. Again, I mentioned before, I'm ADHD. Things like this can help you anchor to your code and help things jump out. It can help you stay focused in your code. And that kind of focus is very important we feel for developers. I know it makes a big difference for me. One thing that a new thing that we're adding is rename suggestions. Now, this is a GitHub Copilot feature, but you can see here I've got a couple methods do stuff. Not particularly the best method name. And I will admit, as I said, I started on the expression blend team. I can't tell you how many button1_click methods I've written over my years here at Microsoft. One of the keyboard shortcuts I do know is Control-R, which is refactor rename, which this is a rename command that will rename all of the references. We've had it in Visual Studio for quite a while. And if I knew what this method did, I could type that name here and it would update all the references. But as I didn't actually write this one, this is a project I'm working with collaboratively, I'm not sure what it does. Well, I've got this little sparkling dots over here. This is going to go out to GitHub Copilot, which is going to analyze the method, figure out what it does, and it's going to recommend some method names for me. So it's pointing out that it's an asynchronous method. Well, I kind of knew that in the method signature, but it's recognizing that it's submitting some orders for me or processing, or it's going to give me some options. Okay, let's go with submit order async. And with that, it's gone ahead, it's renamed it, it's updated the references like refactor rename normally does. And there we go. It just makes it a little bit easier when I'm going back and trying to clean up my code. It's a lot simpler to do some updates. And, it's a place where AI can make things a little bit easier for me. Do some other stuff? No. How about instead retrieve orders async? That feels like a slightly better name for my methods. So, I believe rename suggestions is available now, but
It's available.
Is it available?
Yeah,
Okay,
I've definitely
thanks.
used it.
I always forget which ones are recently out or which ones are coming in the next preview. But everything that I've shown up till now is either available or is coming out in 17.12 Preview 2, which should be coming out fairly soon. So I encourage folks, grab these, give them a try, start playing with them, and we'd love to hear your feedback. We want to know where they're working for you, where they're not working for you. If you encounter problems with them, again, like I mentioned, go up here to help, send feedback, report a problem. We are very aggressive on the problems that we report and suggest a feature. These are suggestion tickets. We're ramping up. We've been working with these and trying to stay on top of the suggestion tickets, and we're addressing more of these as we go along. The editor team in particular, we're making a commitment to make sure we're responding to more of these more frequently. Now, I did want to loop back to a couple of the kind of longer future topics. One of them is the unified settings experience, which what you're looking at right now, this is the new version of tools options. So I've been here for a long time. We all remember tools options and how friendly it is. Forget I said that. This is the new version of it. And there's a lot of great changes that we're doing here. For one thing, it is more consistent in how it does things. All the checkboxes look the same. All the numbers look the same and things like that. We're able to do some new things, like, for instance, show me all the accessibility settings. So if you are an individual or work with an individual who has some form of disabilities, here are some options, and we'll bring all of the options together that have to do with disabilities. And you'll notice at a glance, you can see which options are set that are different from the defaults. So as I mentioned, I have my audio cues on, which you can't hear because I'm not sharing with things like that, but it makes it easier to find what you've set and find your options a little more quickly. One thing that I think is really cool about the USE is edit as JSON. So with one click, I can see all of my settings. And this is a little bit easier for me, that if I'm talking to somebody and I want to tell them, oh yeah, you want to turn your audio cues on, I can just say here, and I'm not seeing, oh, in fact, my cursor's right on it. I can just say, open your JSON file and paste this line in there. And it's a lot easier than, I mean, yeah, the USE is a lot easier to navigate than the old one, but I can just try to add this line in, or here's 6 commands that might make things easier for you. It's a lot easier to navigate.
And with that one, that's cool, right? Because now you can push that settings.json change to your repo, right? For anybody to use.
Absolutely. One of the things in the options is there is the applies to, and you can choose whether you want it to your installation or to the current folder. So you can do exactly that. If there are settings that you want to travel with the project, you have that ability as well. Last but not least is the UI refresh. Again, this has been around in the preview channel since about, I think it was 12.9. This uses the fluent design principles, which is one of the design principles that Windows 11 is designed on. And this goes on the idea of reducing cognitive load. I don't want to dwell on that too much, but the idea is I don't want to use the word gentler, but it's a more spaced out, and it's designed to reduce the visual clutter that there's a lot of scientific research into, just making it a little bit more comfortable to work on, particularly for longer periods of time. Now, I don't want to dive too far into that one, but one of the things that it did allow us to do is deliver a more consistent experience across Visual Studio. And one of the things I kind of like is the different colored themes that we've got. So right now I've got sunny day, here's cool breeze, and you can switch between these just based on what your mood might be like. And it's taking a moment because it wants to take a moment. Come on, there we go. There are a variety of dark themes as well, and I'm going to switch to one of these. Apologies if this is going to be a little bit harder to see up there. So there are light themes and there are dark themes. Let me give it one more moment. And so if you like a dark theme, but one of the pieces of feedback that we got is that some people like to have a dark theme, but they want a light editor. In the menu, there's also editor appearance, and I can choose editor light, so I can control the editor's brightness independently from the rest of the theme. So I want a dark Chrome, but I want a lighter theme so it jumps out at me, and vice versa. I can have a light editor with a dark theme, whatever's more comfortable for you, because everybody has got their own visual acuity. You've got your own. I've talked to people with different disabilities where different combinations work better for them. So again, work with whatever's more comfortable for you. One last thing I did want to jump on really quickly. We have also, for those folks who are passionate about extensions, there is a new extension manager. This used to be a modal dialog, and this is the new extension manager, where we have completely overhauled the extension manager and brought a lot of the information that you used to go out to the web to bring here into the IDE to make it easier and more streamlined to get to your extensions. I encourage you to take a look at this as well, but I am out of time, so I am going to hand it back over to Leslie to go on to the next folks and dive in from there. Thanks so much.
Dante, thank you so much. That was super exciting. Shout out to the extension manager in particular. I actually worked on that a little bit before I changed teams over to .NET. So it's really cool to see it's out in the wild. Also, relating to themes, that's great. More default themes is always an exciting thing to have. Quick question, though. There was a question in chat about, can you change like the font size, the font color, and all that associated with the theme as well?
All of the font sizes and themes and everything like that, you should be able to modify all of that in the themes. All of those will be for each individual theme. So, okay. Yes and no. You can change all the font colors you want, and those are tied to each individual theme. So if you want to change your font colors in Bubblegum, they will be stuck to Bubblegum. If you want to change the font sizes, today they are tied to the theme, but we're changing that because we don't think it makes sense to have to tie the font face or font size to the individual theme. So if you say, I want to use Fira Code 18 in my editor, Visual Studio remember, oh, you like Fira Code 18, it shouldn't remember which colors you want in the theme. You will always have Fira Code 18. So that's a change we're planning on making. That one hasn't made it into the preview branch yet. One last thing I also want to mention about both the unified settings experience and the UI refresh, those are only available in the preview channels for Visual Studio. We've still got more work we're doing on those. We've got a lot of iteration to build on those yet. Those are only available in the preview channel, and I can't make any comments right now as to when those will be in the GA channel. So I encourage you, if you want to play with those, try those in the preview build and keep an eye on the Visual Studio blog as to when those will be promoted to the GA channel. But I don't have any timeline on that right now.
Cool. Thanks, Dante. And if you have any questions for Dante, something I forgot to say up front, if we have time, we will have a brief Q&A. And if not, the good news is that most of the people that are demoing today will be here the rest of VS Live in some capacity, whether it's at their own talk or at a meet and greet and stuff. So you'll have plenty of opportunities to chat with everybody about any of your questions, comments, or concerns. So moving along, we're going to try to touch base on the remote side again and see if that works. Hi, Syed. Let's see.
Hello, can you hear me now? Hello. How's my audio coming through?
Yes.
Okay, I think we're starting up here. So I assume that everybody can hear me now. So on my screen, I've got, and I am sharing my screen. All right, on my screen, I have a link here, and this AKA link will take you to most of the things that we're talking about today. I will talk about some things that are brand new here. But yeah, so the link is aka.ms/vs/http file, and then my info is here for Twitter as well. And when you go to that link, it'll take you to this doc here for using HTTP files in Visual Studio 2022. Let's go ahead and get started here. So we're going to start out first talking about the Endpoints Explorer. And let me switch over to a different app. In order to bring the Endpoints Explorer up, just go to View, Other Windows, Endpoints Explorer. Let me go ahead and zoom in on that for you as well. This is a relatively new tool window, but it's been there for a few releases, but you may not have noticed it because it's not open by default. So this solution that I have here is a ASP.NET Core web API that represents a to-go order restaurant here. You can see we've got 4 categories of items here, and these categories are coming from the tag information for the Open API spec that's defined in the code here. So you can see here we've got to-go order, and that maps to this. And if I expand these, you can see the different endpoints here that's used to manage this application. All right, so that's what we've got there. Let's go ahead and go to, let's check this out as well. So if I right-click on the, on a node in Endpoints Explorer, you've got 2 kind of gestures here. One is to go to the code, and 2 is to generate a request. So that request will go into what's called an HTTP file. So why don't we take a look at this HTTP file here. Let's go ahead and get rid of that request to begin with here. An HTTP file is a file that, starting in .NET 8, has been included with the ASP.NET Core Web API project templates. You'll get that whether you're working in Visual Studio or on the CLI. And if you're not working in Visual Studio, there's other clients that support this file format. The one that we've taken inspiration from is a Visual Studio Code extension called REST Client. So you can use REST Client to be compatible with both Visual Studio and VS Code. Inside this file, you can declare things as variables. Here you can see I've got my restaurant API host address with the URL there, and you'll get that when you create a new project as well. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. I'll go ahead and right-click and say generate request on the get method to take a look at the menu items which are available in this API. But before I run this, let's talk about this request here. So this first line is what's called the request line, and it consists of up to 3 things. The first thing is the HTTP method, which we've got get here. And then we've got the URL. So this is how you use those variables. So it's bracket, bracket, and then the name of the variable. And then you can append anything you want to it. And then optionally, you can also specify your HTTP version here. But we don't really need that. And then if you had any headers, they would come immediately after this line, and then the body would follow that. And I'll get to some examples of those as well. And then finally, to indicate that the request is finished, you'll use ## over here. Let me go ahead and send request on this. And I've already got the app is already kind of running behind the scenes over here, so it should be able to contact that endpoint. What's going on here? All right, let me see. I'm not sure what's going on. Let me run it again. Let's close out of this. Okay. All right, let's try this one more time. Okay, and let me close the file here. And this is like a daily build that I'm working on here, so some issues that I run into you might not see in the actual live running bits here. Okay, so here on the right-hand side, we've got what's called the response view, and there's 4 tabs here. If the endpoint returns either JSON or XML in the formatted tab, you'll see the formatted result here. So here you can see we've got food items here for both breakfast, lunch, and dinner. On the formatted tab, on the raw tab is the raw body of the response as it was brought in by the server here. On the headers tab, these are the headers that have been returned with the response. You can see that the server says Kestrel here because we're running locally. And on this page, you can inspect the more details about the request that was sent out, including the full URL, as well as any headers that were sent with that request. All right, so now let me go over to a different file, and then we'll take a look at some kind of more capabilities of the HTTP file here. All right, so we've already mentioned that you can use variables here. So I want to show you something new, and this is a highly requested feature, and it hasn't been released yet, but this is coming in the next preview of Visual Studio 2022, and that's called Request Variables. And I'm actually going to demo this in a different going to demo this in a to-do API here. So this is David Fowler's to-do API. And I've got my credentials here just for demo purposes, but if you follow that link, here, we do have secret support as well. And those secrets support 3 different providers today. One is ASP.NET Core User Secrets, Azure Key Vault, and then you can also encrypt the values yourself with Windows DP API. So if you are using any secrets, I would highly recommend to put your secrets in one of these 3 secret providers here. All right, so here I've got a to-do app developed by David Fowler, and this to-do app, is it running? Let me go ahead and run this to-do app. All right, so first what we're going to do is go ahead and create a user for this to-do app. So let me go ahead and take a look at this syntax here. This is, it uses the comment syntax, but this is not a comment, really. This is an indication that the request that follows should be given a name, and then that name should be create. So this is the create request. So let me go ahead and send that request. All right, we can see I've got a 200 OK here, so the user should have been created. If I were to try that same exact request again, I should get an error because the user already exists, so we can see that that's true. Now what I'm doing is I can flow through information here from one request to another, but we're not actually doing that yet. But we'll take a look at this one. So in this case, I have a new named request that's called login. Let's go ahead and send that request. And here I use those variables which I've defined previously. So we'll go ahead and do send request, and then you can see I've got this JWT token that was returned in the body, and this is a JSON response. So now with that named request, so remember that I named this one login. So let me just scroll up one line. So this is called login. So after you send that request, you can access values from either the request or the response for that request there. So let's take a look at this. So now let me go ahead and scroll down a little bit. So here I want to call an endpoint that requires the user authentication here. So we've got the token from when we logged in, and this is how we can access that. So I can say login.response.body. And then if it's a JSON response, you can use a JSON path. If it's a XML response, you can use XPath expression here. Let me go ahead and send request on that one. All right, so we can see that this user doesn't have any to-dos because we haven't created any to-dos here. All right, so now I'll go ahead and create a new to-do item here, and I'm going to flow in that same bearer token here as well from that login request that we made. So this is the format where you've got your request line. You also have the headers here that immediately follow the request line, and then a blank line for the body. And then whatever follows that blank line before the triple hash will be included in the body here. Let me go ahead and send that request. All right, so now I can see that I've built a to-do item called build to-do API. Let me go ahead and kind of create another to-do item here, try API with an HTTP file. So here you can see that I'm kind of exercising my API, and values are kind of flowing through from one request to another one. So let's go ahead and get all the to-do items here so we can take a look at those. Now I can get the specific to-do item. So that's the build to-do API. So now I want to modify this title, but what I want to do is append to it. So I want to take the previous value of the title and then append to that. So let's take a look at that syntax. All right, so here we're going to call the put endpoint for an update. I've got those same two headers that will be passed in. I'll pass in the ID as well from the to-do one named request, and then the title will take the existing title, and then I'll add verified at, and then this particular timestamp here. Let's go ahead and run that through, and we'll take a look. Okay, so that has finished. And then let me go ahead and get that same to-do item. We can see that build to-do API has been verified at this particular time. So you can, imagine when you're working with your APIs, how you can use this new capability to kind of flow the information through. All right, I know I'm kind of running out of time here. Let me try and speed this up we also have support for environments, and we've got supports for environments and secrets, but let's take a look at this. So environments are defined in a file that's called http-client.env.json. And it's the schema here is you create the object here. The name is the name of the environment, and then you have key value pairs underneath for vanilla environments. And then this is how you use the secrets. So this is an example of user secrets. This is an example of Windows DP API has encrypted that, and that's machine and user specific. And then here's an example of Azure Key Vault. But let me just demo you the environment feature here. So let me go back up to the top, and currently any variable that's defined in the HTTP file will take precedent over anything that's defined in the environment. So you see here I've got my environment defined. The environment defines that same variable. All right, so I just commented that out, and then I'm going to close that file and then reopen it because I've got some issues in this build. Let me scroll all the way down to the bottom here. In the top right, you can see the environment selector here. So if I were to drop this down, you can see you can go none, and then any of the environments that are defined in that file. Let me go ahead and send this request here. We're in the dev environment, and the message is hello from dev, and you might have seen that in that JSON file. If I switch over to staging and then send the request, now it says hello from staging. And then let me I did switch over to staging, and I've redefined, okay, hold on. I've redefined that URL. So let me hit this over here, and then this should hit a Azure website. If I go to the request tab, I can see it's automatically switched over to that other remote endpoint. But if I switch back to dev, this should now go back to my local host. All right, just some kind of examples of what you can do with the HTTP files working in Visual Studio. This is an area that we're heavily investing in. We're going to have a lot more features and functionality coming through here, but if you can try out the request variable support, and that will be in the following preview, that would be really great. And I'll be here for any questions or comments. Thank you very much. I'll send it back to Leslie.
Super cool. I discovered Endpoint Explorer by accident when I was like just I think I was trying to go to another window and I clicked on it by mistake. And it's actually really cool and very useful. It's a really nice sandbox for those of you with web apps containing lots of different API calls. So definitely check it out if you haven't already. So moving along, we're going to hop around a bit, and Harshada is going to be talking about some cool debugging stuff.
Sure, thank you. So again, I work with diagnostics team, and we have been adding many new features and improvements to simplify the diagnostic and debugging and profiling for you. But I'm going to be sharing some of our new AI-assisted features, which I think will be also helpful overall to make the whole debugging and profiling experience easier. So the first one I have is related to data analysis. I think Sebastian mentioned one of his favorite feature is the locals autos and watch windows. So you can do the data inspection, variable inspection in Visual Studio using locals autos or data tips as well. A lot of times when you have an unexpected value or an error code in the locals, like error code, you can see that here in the locals windows. So if I'm in this situation, the first thing I will do is that I'll go to the locals window, see the value, and then go back to the code. And then if I can't figure that out, I'll go back, switch my context, go to the internet, try to do some internet searching. For an example here, I have this very simple program here where I'm trying to calculate some quadrant equation. Already in the debug mode, I gave some random input. And if you notice here in this locals window, I have an unexpected value that is not a number. Now, as I mentioned, what I will do is I'll go back to code, try to figure out, or go to the internet and try to figure out what's going on. In scenarios where I have an error code, it's more difficult because you have to go do more investigation what that error is about. To make this more easier, what we have done is if you right click on any of these values in the locals, autos, watch windows, or even in data tips, you have an option to do Ask Copilot. So what it does, it will open a Copilot window within your IDE, and it will give you more details about this variable, where that variable is used, why you are seeing the value which you're seeing, and it also provides you a possible code fix. Now, looks like in this scenario, I haven't handled a negative discriminant case. So the Copilot is telling me to replace these 4 lines with a newer code. I can do that just using this preview button, and then it will insert it within my editor right away. Once I accept this, I am guessing if I rerun this program, I will be getting a output saying that the complex roots are not present, instead of getting this unexpected value here. So I feel even if this is super important, or this is super helpful in the scenarios like this when you're seeing in a non-expected value or error code, but I think this will be also helpful if you're dealing with a new application, if you're trying to learn a new application or understanding what's going on and trying to understand why we are seeing this particular values for the variables. Another area which is super common in debugging is breakpoints. And one of our highly used breakpoints is conditional breakpoint. I love conditional breakpoints too. It's very easy if you wanted to try out, or you wanted to see the state of your application in different conditions, or if you wanted to control your execution of the breakpoint. But sometimes coming up with those conditions can be a little tricky. I am going to stop debugging here. Sometimes coming up with those conditions can be tricky, and even remembering the syntax can be tricky as well. For example, here, I am actually comparing a string, and I want to convert this breakpoint to a conditional breakpoint. I'm going to go to Settings, and then select Conditions. Now here, Copilot can actually help you come up with these conditions. As soon as I place my cursor here within this text box, Copilot can actually provide you some expression suggestions based on the code behind. I think this is one of those scenarios where I said that remembering the syntax can be tricky as well. So I'm going to go ahead, select the second one here. And if you see you still have an ability to define your own conditions, you can go ahead, edit the one which is suggested by Copilot. This also works great with actions. If you wanted to have a nice AI-curated trace messages for your application, you can do that too. If I place my cursor here, it will give me some trace message suggestions as well. So I think this will again be very handy if you are new to conditional breakpoint. It will help you provide different options you can use for the conditions, or if you're a regular user for the conditional breakpoint, this can definitely speed up your conditional breakpoint setting. I also want to add that one of our biggest feedback for the conditional breakpoint is performance. So even if we are adding these new features within this area, we are still working on our fundamentals. In our recent release, we were able to improve the performance for our native C++ program by up to 60% when we did that testing for 10K iterations on our local. So please definitely give this a try and let us know if this is working for you and the performance is working for you or not. So the third and the last area which I have is I'm going to talk about profiling. So let me bring up another. Okay, I'm going to be using a different application for here. I have my previous DIAC session saved here or opened here. But what I did is I went to a debug menu, selected Performance Profiler, and then collected a trace using the CPU usage tool and started and collected a trace using a CPU usage tool. Once you do that, this is something you will see. This is a very normal view for a CPU summary. You will have top functions that will give you what functions, which is function name, which is taking a lot of CPU, or you also have a hot path, which will give you a hot path through the code. Another thing which you can see in most of the scenario is the top insights. Right now, we don't have anything here, but in some scenario, we show top insights which are based on our predefined rule. In this scenario, we don't have top insights, but what we have is this Ask Copilot button. Now, when I click on this Ask Copilot button, Copilot actually establishes a context based on, okay, let's try again. Let me open my file again and see if it works. It's been open for a long time. Okay, again, as you see, we don't have any top insights here. I'm going to give a couple seconds so all the data is loaded here. And then once you click the Ask Copilot button here, Copilot actually brings up this chat window. It is establishing a context based on these top functions, the hot path, and the source code, even the non-user code. And it gives you this nice summary of possible optimization suggestions, along with some possible fixes for that. And now if you notice here, I'm going to close this window a little bit so you guys can see. We also have some AI-generated top insights now. This is more like a UX version of this summary, which is much easier to read and have more actionable insights. And you still have an option to go ahead and deep down into this. For example, I am going to try using Ask Copilot on this particular insight here. It looks like it is talking about reusing data structures. And then once I do that, you will see you have another view, which is more like a source view. Here, a Copilot was able to expand more on that particular suggestion for optimization. And in addition to that, it also provided a code fix, which you can add to your code and then rerun the trace. But if you notice here, we also have a solution or like the source view, which also indicates some of the problem lines. For example, here, it is telling you that this particular line is taking a 47% of CPU, and this particular line is taking a 29% of CPU. So if you wanted to go more deeper, you can actually analyze this whole method using an analyze method with Copilot. And that can, again, provide you more detailed analysis for suggestions to optimize your code. Again, one of our main goals with the Profiler team is to make the tools more accessible and so that anyone can use the profiling tool. You don't have to be an expert for that. And I think this particular feature will be definitely in that direction because even if you're new to profiling, you should be able to use Copilot, and that can help you understand what profiling is in general and how you can optimize your code. And if you're, again, regular user for a profiler, that can definitely speed up your process on profiling and analyzing the performance. That's all I had. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Arshada. Really cool stuff as always. I like the debugger stuff. I especially like the Copilot features that are kind of integrated with stuff I already use. Like I already use conditional breakpoints, I already rename things. So it's nice that that option is just there now. So I'm more likely to use that feature. So that's pretty cool. And also shout out to the Profiler, wonderful tool. There are other talks happening later during this conference all about, shout out to Nick in the back who's going to be talking about profiling later during this conference. So check that out if you want to learn more. And up next, we're going to move along with the in-person crew currently. So Wendy, would you like to talk about some code coverage stuff?
Sure. I'll try to be quick because I know there's a couple other things we want to get to today. So who uses Test Explorer and code coverage in Visual Studio? Woo, a couple. Woohoo! I'm not alone. Awesome. So I'm going to show some of the things that have been added over the last year in the code coverage space. In this solution here, I have, because I'm responsible for testing features, I have one main program that has five test projects. And so in previous versions of code coverage, when you would try to run it, each of these tests, they didn't merge well. You couldn't see what your true code coverage was. But since 17.9, I believe, our latest merging technology is far superior to what it used to be. So now I can see all of those tests and what my true code coverage is for my project finally. And so I get this great report here. that now shows me for my project, across all of the different test projects, what my coverage is and where I have some gaps in my coverage, which is great. Also added around that same time are these glyphs in the editor. So now you can identify, instead of just, if you don't like the highlighted, you can turn off the highlight and just use the glyphs to see where you're missing coverage in your code, which is awesome. And one of the things that I really like are some of the report view changes that we've made. For project view, which is the old way, that shows it based on project, but now I can switch over to source view, and it changes my results here. So it's set up. So if I had, when I switch over to some of my other projects where I've got APIs and front end, it's more, makes more sense to me to be able to then drill in and see, my helper file here, and where and what lines aren't covered there and that. But we've made even more improvements in this. I can take it a step further and not just see the full report, but I can see the impact that the changes that I have made to the code coverage. So if I am in a large legacy code base that has a lot of missing, but I want to see what did I add and where am I missing code coverage, so I can then come say, here's my repo. I wanted to compare against what's in main and enter, and then that will filter down the report to just show where's the lines of code that you impacted since your last PR, and be able to then go drill in and make sure that you add the right coverage for the code that you wrote instead of the massive parts that are missing. There's also some new filtering capabilities even beyond that. If your company has code coverage rules where you need to have at least 80% or stuff like that, you can then come drill into these search and say, I want to show where coverage is less than 80%. And so then when I do that, it's going to then filter it down to that. So I don't have any files that are less than 80%. So everything is great with that one. So that all these different filtering options allow for you to better understand where you're at with your code coverage in your system. One last thing I wanted to show before I hand it over to see if we can get one more demo in. You may have seen in 1710 in Test Explorer, if you have a failed test, you can now ask Copilot to help you understand what your test failure is. And so when you click that, that opens the chat window that gives you an explanation of why that test failed, and offers you some different information there. This is meant to be a brief explanation. In the future versions, you may have seen a video. There's a couple of videos out there of what we're working on now, which is going to be the next step of that, where we integrate the debugging test integration, where it will actually go out and ask Copilot for a debug plan. It's going to ask you, it's going to set breakpoints, and it's going to identify what variables need to be watched. It's going to send all of that information back to Copilot once you've hit the breakpoint, and it'll say you need to continue debugging, or say, no, we figured out, we've hit this breakpoint, tells us what we need to do, and here's your fix. And you can then apply it directly in there. So an interactive conversational experience with helping you debug your test failures, which is, I'm really excited. Should be in preview 1 of 1712. All goes well. And that's all I have for today.
Cool. Thank you, Wendy. And so we're down to the last 7 or so minutes. So we're going to try to go through this as quickly as possible. So before I pass the reins to Sebastian, I want to give a shout out to Jordan Mathiasen. He's on the remote stream right now. I'm sorry we couldn't get to your demo. That said, he is going to be at the conference later this week. So if you have any questions for him about .NET, and especially .NET and AI, he'll be there. Happy to help, I'm sure. So thank you, Jordan. And so now, last but not least, we're going to talk about some good old version control to close us out. So Sebastian, if you're ready,
cool.
How about it?
All right. Who uses version control within Visual Studio itself? Okay. Oh, good amount of hands. What about the command line? Who still uses the command line for Git? All right, we have a few folks. All righty. Well, hopefully some of the demos that we do today will maybe get you to transition into the IDE. If not, at least utilize some of those Azure DevOps or GitHub features that we have within Visual Studio. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Let's see if that pops up. Oh no. Let's see. Share screen. Entire screen. Yeah. Should pop up in any second now. Alrighty. Cool. All right. So as you can see, I have made some changes to a C# file in the editor. And I'm going to go ahead and go over to the Git Changes tool window. If it sounds like most people do utilize it, but if you don't know how to get here, you can go to the Git top level menu or into View and go to Git Changes, and that'll open up the tool window. And so in this window right here, something that we've demoed before is going on the GitHub Copilot side of things is generating that commit message with AI. We heard a lot of feedback that the message was a bit too verbose, too long. So one of the changes that we've made in the new 17.11 GA is kind of providing a more concrete message in your commit message. So you have a title, and then you also have a briefer description. So if you go ahead and accept that, you can modify this if you are unhappy with the message. You can remove some of it or edit it. But let's go ahead and commit those changes. And let's go ahead and push to GitHub. And one of the notifications that we've had for quite a while now is creating a pull request either in the browser or now within Visual Studio. So if I go ahead and click on the notification, we've already demoed the new pull request window before. So this is one of those places where instead of having to context switch to go over to the web browser, you can go ahead and do it within the IDE. Now we have demoed this before, but some of the new things that we've added are the default templates. So if your team utilizes templates within GitHub or Azure DevOps to follow the best practices when creating pull requests, we generate those templates from the hosting provider and add it to the description. This is behind a feature flag. So similar to what Dante showed earlier in the tools options, you go to preview features, pull request templates, just make sure to check that on to be able to have that feature so that it's integrated with Azure DevOps or GitHub. Now, if you didn't want to utilize the template, you could remove it. And if you wanted to utilize an AI-generated description with Copilot, you can do that as well. Another thing that we've added to the 17.11 GA is before we didn't have the ability to create a pull request as a draft. So we know that's a standard practice in the web as well. So we've included that where you can create as draft, right? If you're not fully ready to create a full pull request with your changes and still get some developers to check out certain things and get some certain feedback, you can now create that pull request as a draft as well. So we've gone over committing, we've gone over creating a pull request. The next step of the process would be reviewing pull requests. So let me go ahead and check out a branch. Alrighty, so back in that Git Changes tool window, you can see that there's a few new things included. Again, utilizing the standard practice of our notifications, you'll be able to see that the branch has an active pull request. So you can either show some comments in the files themselves, or you can go back to the browser. But again, trying to prevent that context switching from the web browser to the IDE, what we can do is within this command, you can see that we can show those comments in the files. So if I go ahead and do that, we have one of those traditional comments, a small nit that, we forgot to remove some white space when creating our pull request. So I can go ahead and quickly just remove that white space, bring the comment back up and say fixed, reply and resolve. And those changes will take place in the web browser as well. So you can kind of iterate, get feedback, and not have to go back and forth from the IDE and that web browser. So being able to review those pull requests within the IDE and creating them as well. Now, one more thing that I wanted to show really quick. If let's say you are kind of done with your own code, your own pull request, and you're trying to get more context on your code base, another thing that you can do is go to view all commits. This will take you to the Git repository window. And here you'll see that we have a view. Let me kind of make it a bit bigger of single commits that we have in the Git graph, right? So what you can do now, going back and building on top of that Copilot, I can go to the view commit details right over here. And that'll take me to the commit details. We see that there's a message in this commit that says code refactoring. Now, standard practice and something that we should always be doing is going over those commits, those files one by one to understand what it's doing. But if you, again, want a helper like a Copilot, right, you can go ahead and click that explain button on the top right corner. And this will use a similar algorithm to what we utilize for our AI generated commits and our descriptions. And it'll explain the set of diffs that you have in the commit. So this will be an easy way to kind of ramp up when it comes to your teammates' commits, right? Especially that historical code. It'll be a nice way to get a brief recap of what those changes entailed. So we've gone over committing, creating pull requests, reviewing pull requests, and also just understanding commits as a whole. So hopefully this will make that version control experience within the IDE a little bit better. Thank you.
Sweet. Thank you, Sebastian. And perfect timing. That was awesome. Thank you to everyone. I'm sorry we had to speed through a couple demos and do our technical difficulties, but no worries. That was a lot of really cool stuff. I know version control has come a long way. It's really cool that we've now made it to kind of the full end-to-end experience that comes with pushing changes and stuff now that we have PRs in the mix and even comments. So really exciting stuff. So if you're interested in learning more about any of the stuff that we demoed, good news. Again, a lot of these people are going to be around for the remainder of the the conference. So feel free to reach out to them and ask them any questions that you have. And also you can check out the Visual Studio Toolbox show on Microsoft Visual Studio. Just a personal plug there. A lot of these people are familiar faces on the show. We talk about cool features, both new and old, and Visual Studio that are totally worth your time and are worth exploring. So with that, thank you all so much and happy coding.
Thank you.